Visions, they keep appearing in my head over and over again. Could an electronic signal be implanted into the human brain in some way?
The sound you were blown away by, Kathleen, I pulled it through that antenna directly from the atmosphere. It has all the components of a signal.
We are talking to Christian Fonnesbech, the director of Cloud Chamber, this upcoming, I guess, internet murder mystery, social network game, movie, found footage thing. It's difficult to explain, and I guess that's partially because you're doing something that's almost completely undone before, or brand new. So could you shortly describe what is Cloud Chamber actually?
Well, basically it's just a good story told on what the internet can do. So on a single site, we're mixing film, found footage, with social networking and game mechanics. So we're making the audience into detectives, and they basically have to discuss their way through the mystery. What happened, who did what to who, what is the signal, could there be something out there? It's all up for discussion. And then we mix fiction with documentary and maps of fictional institutes and diaries and all kinds of things. So it's a little bit like watching, let me say that again, it's a little bit like watching Hercule Poirot with 3,000 people and discussing who did it. So, except this is a mystery with supernatural overtones and a pretty funky soundtrack. We've got Trandemøller and Burial and, Lulu Rouge, really good. So a headphone experience online mystery.
All right. So, what inspired you to this sort of approach, and how long have you actually been working on this game?
I've been working full-time on Cloud Chamber for 3 years, but it took me 10 years before that to figure out how to do it. So I directed 35 online projects for learning, recruitment, advertising, and all sorts of things. Anybody who would pay me to figure out how to tell a story on the internet, I worked for them. So after 35 projects, we got this offer from the Film Institute, and they said, so which story would you like to tell? And after 10 years, that's the kind of question you want to hear. So then we were able to take everything we learned over 35 projects and spend 3 years putting Cloud Chamber together.
So from getting the go-ahead and getting the budget, I imagine, what happens next? What was the first thing you did?
Actually, what you just described was a 2-year process.
Oh.
It's not as if the Film Institute just says, hey, you're great, here's a check.
Right.
No, first you've got to get in with the synopsis, you've got to find your writer, you've got to develop the treatment, we've got to develop the game design. Then we start producing, so then we change the treatment, we change the game design, then we start shooting, then we start editing, then we have to change the game design, and so on and so on and so on. So it's a very organic process where a lot of very talented people come in and change it. So, when the writer comes in, things start to change, and then the game designer starts to change, and then you have to go back and revise the writing and the shooting. And so it's a very organic process that, I guess the final budget wasn't approved until, 18 months in. At that point, we could have been shut down any day. So you walk with that and you just try to do it as well as you can. And then, of course, it's different from a film because this is more like opening a club online. So the budget continues. Now we have to make it inhabitable and welcome our guests and make sure they have a good time in there. It's not like a film where it's frozen, you just shoot it off into the ether.
So what sort of content, and I guess how much of it can people expect once they dive into Cloud Chamber?
We think an average player will take about 10 to 15 hours to get through it. The first 3 parts are free, so we think there's about 2 to 3 hours of free experience in there. But if you really get into it, and you get into those space discussions, could there be a signal in subatomic particles? Is Kathleen in love with him or him? You could easily spend 50 to 100 hours in there. Because the main gameplay is social. It's about discussing this thing with other people. And if you enjoy discussing things with other people, then the sky's the limit.
We should probably get into the story and into the setting and the what's actually going on here. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, what we really have here is a story about a young female astrophysicist. And she basically betrays her father and risks insanity in order to save humanity from itself. That's the big pitch. But basically what we have is it's found footage, so the characters are filming and writing the story themselves and leaving it for you to find. And they discover that the Petersen Institute, where they work, has hidden a signal from another world for 40 years. At the same time, they discover that Kathleen's mother died working with the signal 40 years ago. And then they start to peel back what's going on. Maybe her father killed her, maybe she went insane and killed herself. Then the signal starts manifesting in Kathleen, the young astrophysicist's head. Maybe she's going insane. That's up to you to discuss. And at the same time, we have the documentary footage in there from about space. So while you're going into the characters and into the past, you're also going out into space. So we really try to build it up as realistically, as real as possible. But there's no doubt that it's fiction, of course, but it's very important to us to ground it in real experience, real science.
Yeah, and the documentary stuff that's in there, that's proper, real documentaries, right?
That's real documentary that we borrowed from the European Space Agency, and they let us select from this massive media database. So you get to see how the universe was born, and telescopes, and space scans, and particles, and how satellites work, and all that sort of thing. So it's very scientific and kind of supernatural.
But it's not a sort of, it's not meant as an edutainment or an educational game, I guess, right?
No, this is more like Discovery Channel filmed by David Lynch. There's real knowledge in there, but the internet is like that, isn't it? I mean, one of the main pleasures for me on the internet is I get to feel like a detective. I get to check if what people are saying is right. So I go to Wikipedia and I embed that link in a discussion and so on. So in that way, you can always draw reality into it, and we've been very careful to base it on reality. But of course, there's some poetic license in there. I mean, could there really be a signal buried inside subatomic particles? Could it be God talking to us? Could it be another civilization? How would a civilization that is thousands of years older than us, how would it communicate with us? And so on. So there's a lot of imagination in there. And the fact that some of it's real doesn't make it less entertaining on the internet. I think that makes it more real and makes it easier to dive into and more fun, I think.
Why go with this approach instead of just writing a novel or doing a movie? Or
I love that question. For me, film, for example, is an industrial art form. You know, it's chemistry and electronics and so on. It was made last century. Where is the storytelling form that fits my life now? I don't want to have to be in a specific room at 8 o'clock because my life doesn't work like that anymore. I want to be able to dive into this story whenever I can. I want to decide if I'm going to be in there for 2 minutes or 10 hours. I want it to update me every time somebody likes what I write or say, hey, I think you've got the right idea and so on, and it calls me back and so on. So this is really designed as an experience and a story for the age we live in, and using the media possibilities that we have now. I think, you know, I love film, but to sit still for 2 hours, it's got to be brilliant. I mean, I'm not sitting around for mediocre films anymore. I just think the form doesn't really work for me anymore. And even if I go on Netflix and so on, my tendency is to chop the film up into 10-minute segments. But films, they break down if you do that. The emotional connection, it loses it. But this is designed to keep the emotional connection. This is designed to, like reading a book or something, but using all the possibilities of the internet.
How exactly does that design work? What's the design part of that?
Well, you're basically, as a user, you're playing yourself. You're entering a database full of confidential media files. So it's like a 3D WikiLeaks you're moving into, and the higher the mountain, the more important the media file. So you're really navigating media files, trying to figure out what happened, and discussing that. And we base the discussions very much on Facebook, so if you like Facebook, you'll feel at home. Also, you know, Facebook has been great. We now know how a forum works, or, you know, so there's a lot of elements borrowed from different places, also from YouTube and so on, but we also borrowed a lot from movies and from books. There's a lot of written stuff in there. So we're really, you know, taking bits from different media and putting them together into something new. What do we call that? I'd call it internet fiction.
And it's about piquing the viewers or readers' interest, I guess, keeping that.
It's very much about
curiosity, even is actually the word I'm looking for.
It's about engaging people with curiosity, but also emotionally. Mm-hmm. I think the internet as a medium has all the potential of movies and books. I think it has a much bigger potential because you can put all that a movie could do on the internet. You can put all that a book could do. You could put all that the theater can do. And then there's the new stuff like search and social and so on. So we really have everything the old media could do, plus the stuff the internet can do. I think this is going to be the greatest narrative format ever, one day.
Cloud Chamber is just about to launch. So what's the next step for you once you flick the switch and things online?
Well, then the real fun begins, because it's a little bit like opening a club. We're inviting the guests in now. So now we get to, it's like a living work of art where we can see where people go, we can see where they're confused, should we adjust here, and so on. And also the main pleasure is social, so it's not about shooting it off and then letting it go. It's about seeing what happens in there and how can we make it as good as an experience as possible. So we're gonna be in there along with people. That's the next phase.
All right. Christian, thank you very much for talking to us. Cloud Chamber launches, well, I guess it's online by the time you see this, so thanks.
Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it.
So I found there is a system to it. It's not random.